What's up, Best Ball Live Nation? This is Greg Smith at Greg Suss on Twitter. I'm your host. Joining me on this episode of Best Ball Live, Zach Krueger. Zachary, Zach, which you prefer?
Sorry, I'm sending out the tweet link. I'm cool with Zach, man. Most people just go with Zach.
It's quicker. It's easy. Let's keep it snappy, Zach. All right. Zach
right.
Krueger on the stream with me at ZK_FFB on Twitter. We are drafting Superflex Best Ball Slim at the FFPC today, and we drew the first pick. We are very lucky. I feel that the karma gods have rewarded us because we were terrified that this league was not going to fill on time, but it did. We got a lot of drafters, so thanks to everybody who joined the league and helped us get this thing off at 9 p.m. I have an early flight to catch tomorrow, so trying to get as much sleep as possible after this stream is over. But we're not going to cut any corners. We're going to draft as best as we possibly can. We got 3.5 minutes before the draft kicks off with us at the top. Zach, what do you want to do with the 101 in a Superflex Best Ball?
I mean, obviously, when you're looking at any of these drafts, the 101 in a non-Superflex league is going to be Christian McCaffrey. Some people might try to get cute and sprinkle in some Dalvin Cook, but in this case of the Superflex league, it really just comes down to McCaffrey or Mahomes, generally speaking. So it's tempting to kind of go Mahomes here, but the way I'm kind of looking to tackle this will probably be still get the running back one, get him out of the way. You can really kind of get off and running that way. I can probably hopefully avoid the position for a little bit more going forward. After that, we can get some quarterbacks later on. There's going to be some guys who fall. I know even like drafting like the Scott Fish Bowl, we see quarterbacks fall that way, and that has really unique quarterback scoring. I just did a Draft Sharks Invitational where we didn't take quarterback with the first couple of picks. That was a Superflex Best Ball league. We ended up getting now I'm putting myself on the spot here. I know we got Trey Lance. I believe that we also got Cam Newton. I forget who else, but I'll look it up. But point being, you can fade the quarterback position, find guys later, and get McCaffrey here at the 101.
Well, especially when the fade is giving you McCaffrey, right? Like just this clear tier above all the other running backs. I mean, Dalvin Cook is great, but he's not Christian McCaffrey. Nobody is Christian McCaffrey, and that's why I agree with you. I think you kind of have to take him 101, even in Superflex. I think that's the case in Best Ball. It's the case in managed leagues. Like, I just don't know how you get away from McCaffrey at the 101 in any typical format this year. Do you feel the same way? Like, what would it take for you to not go with McCaffrey first overall? Like wide receiver premium PPR? Like, I honestly can't even like concoct a believable scenario in my mind where I wouldn't take him first. And maybe that's a problem. Maybe I need to open my mind up a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah, the only way I don't see myself taking McCaffrey first overall is if I just had so many first overall picks over the course of the draft where I want to talk about trying to like diversify my portfolio to make sure I'm not too overexposed to him. But assuming that you're not getting, a bevy of number one overall picks, I would just take him where you get him, keep it moving. If it really gets to be that bad where you think you're just going to be overexposed to him and it's going to cost you leagues if he goes down, go with Dalvin Cook or somebody like that. Maybe even Alvin Kamara has a case for the number one overall pick. If you really didn't want to go with McCaffrey at the 101, but assuming that you're like me, you usually get stuck with like the 110 or later. I just go with McCaffrey and keep it moving. I think that he's going to be the lock to be the RB1, or at least very close to it, assuming he's healthy in 2021.
I will gladly overexpose my portfolio to Christian McCaffrey. Give me that opportunity, please. Please.
Yeah, I would as well.
And that's the other thing is because like you and I both kind of have the same mentality, you're just not going to get McCaffrey at 102 or 103 in most leagues. Now, I should say that Best Ball does make that more of a possibility. Like you might get McCaffrey at 102, 103 here in this format because someone at 101 might take Mahomes or they might take Josh Allen or whoever they believe is the best quarterback if they think that that's a more valuable pick. So, right. I mean, that's kind of the beauty of doing the Best Ball in Superflex is because you actually might get McCaffrey second pick, which again, sign me up for that every time. I'm gonna slam the button on that. But we're off to the races here. The draft is off and running. We're just gonna take McCaffrey and wait to see what comes back to us. Since that was such an easy pick, let's take a quick break right off the top to say that if you go to 4for4.com, get subscribed, you will receive a voucher to use over at the FFPC worth up to $35. So if you're a new user at the FFPC, you'll get a $35 coupon. That's enough for one of these Superflex Best Ball Slims. You could do one of their Superflex drafts that has kickers and defense. They have one QB formats. They've got all sorts of different options at that $35 price point here at the FFPC. So sign up for a sub at 4for4. If you're a new user at FFPC, you get a free draft on us. If you're a returning user to FFPC, you still get a $10 voucher towards the cost of whichever type of draft you want to do. So a really good deal. A lot of great stuff going on at 4for4, especially this time of year as we're ramping up towards week 1. Zach, what have you've been working on? I know you've got some stuff up at 4for4. You've got some stuff at RotoViz. Like, what's been in the hopper for you lately?
Yeah, so real quick, let me just say I always thought this was kind of a fun fact. The only FFPC I ever played last season was also my first one. I played it on the $35 FFPC coupon from 4for4. I did a redraft league. I ended up winning the whole thing. So nice little correlation between signing up for 4for4, getting that $35 pick. Maybe the stars align perfectly to make that happen. So definitely a good coupon. Go out there and get it. See if you can go 1 for 1 like I did last year. But
works every time, man.
Yeah, I think that's a cheat code that a lot of people haven't gotten woke to yet. But no, so as far as work goes and what I've been working on lately, I just recently published an article on RotoViz earlier last week where I talked about doing a reverse engineering of a draft based on some conversations I had had with Sean Siegel in the past. It's something that he looks to do a lot of. It's pretty much looking to build your draft from the back end to the front end, trying to figure out what picks may fall to you over the last few late rounds. In this case, I did rounds 18 to, I believe, 14 going backward, and just kind of mapped out different players who we could be looking at in that range based on ADP, and then kind of threw out a few recommendations on not just who I like, but then also who I like and how they may fit different kind of builds at different areas of the draft. So, if you're going something like 0 running back, maybe you're using those late rounds to fill out the running or the wide receiver position, maybe sneak in another running back or something like that. So I had done that article. I've got a couple of player profile articles over at 4for4 right now. And then I also have on the RotoViz YouTube channel, I have a live stream called Roster Lock, a best ball show, where I just have a weekly guest on, sometimes bi-weekly, depending on everyone's schedules, where we just kind of get into a best ball draft. Obviously, we draft that team together, kind of like we're doing here tonight, talk about some best ball strategy along the way. And now really with training camp coming up, it's kind of also fun just to get people's opinions on the ever-changing landscape of the best ball season and how they're perceiving different things, simply based on, camp reports, preseason games, injuries and stuff like that. So a little bit of everything going on right now.
Yeah, the reverse engineering of the draft is a really cool topic. And I would say that if we're talking about how I would approach that in the Superflex Best Ball Slim format, the wide receivers that you have available at the end of these drafts are always a lot more appealing, reliable, whatever positive adjective you want to prescribe to them than the other positions. Like, there are going to be no viable quarterbacks left in the final rounds of this draft. The tight ends are going to be trash because it's tight end premium scoring. All the good tight ends get pushed up, and even the mediocre tight ends get pushed up because people are always playing catch up. And then running back, again, just turns into a wasteland after so long, whereas wide receiver, you can talk yourself into a lot of the wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, even wide receiver 4 types in the right teams, the right offenses, the right context. So that's something to keep in mind as we approach this draft, is that wide receiver is deeper, and it's also the least important position for us because you only need 2 starting wide receivers in any given weekly lineup. On top of the 2 wide receiver spots, you have a super flex spot, which can be a wide receiver, but we want it to be a QB. And then you have a normal flex spot, which can be, wide receiver, running back, or tight end. But because it's tight end premium, if you end up with 2 pretty good tight ends, sometimes your tight ends will push wide receivers even out of the regular flex spot. So again, wide receiver, definitely less of a priority, but we are seeing that play out a little bit in the first round here. No Tyreek, no Devontae, although Devontae went at the 1-2 turn. I will pull up what I consider the typical roster construction based upon my experience over these streams. 3 quarterbacks, 5 to 7 running backs, 6 to 8 wide receivers, 2 to 3 tight ends. So really curious to see where we land here in the second round. We've got a few picks before we come back up again. I like having the picks back to back. I don't know about you though, Zach. Do you like drafting at the wheel like this?
I don't mind it when I am just kind of drafting on my own, or in this case, you're the host of the show, so it makes my life a little bit easier. But in my experience doing my live stream, I do not like being on the turn when I'm trying to grind out content and talk with someone, and on top of that, pick out a team. So you might have a little bit harder than I do right now in terms of that. But just speaking in general, I don't mind the turn. I think it kind of gives you a chance to hopefully read the room a little bit and figure out the different runs that we're seeing right now. In this case, we have 6 quarterbacks who went in the first round. I'm sorry, we have 5 who went in the first. No, we had 6.
We have 6, yeah.
Round. We got 2 more coming back here. So we already got 8 quarterbacks off the board. We're not even midway through the second round yet. So, we kind of see that a pretty early quarterback run is going on here at this time. So just knowing that we'll probably still get something good at the end and hopefully trying to play the room. And then when given the opportunity to, also possibly trying to start a run so we're not caught without a position before everyone else gets it going. So it can be tough, but I mean, when you have Christian McCaffrey on your roster, things feel a little bit better already. So I don't mind going out the 101 at all.
Yeah, McCaffrey spackles over a lot of holes potentially. Yes. It is worth auditing, like you said, what the other teams are doing, because being in this position at the turn, we may have to reach for all sorts of different types of players, not just quarterbacks. But in this case, QB is kind of the crux of the draft. There's a very limited supply relative to the number of drafters. And so it is worth noting that the 2 drafters at the other end didn't take any quarterbacks. So we can kind of just automatically assume, and maybe they'll continue to pass in the position, but after we make our 2-3 picks, they at the other end are likely at least to take maybe 1 on within their next 2 picks. And so you can kind of, again, reverse engineer what is going to come back to us, like how many quarterbacks we expect to make it back, at each spot. But we're coming back up here. Let's pull the draft room up. What I've done is I've put the quarterbacks as the FFPC ranks them in the queue so that we can compare to other positions. So at tight end, Kittle's still there. Then, Pitts, Hawkins, and Andrews, kind of the tier 1 and tier 1A sort of guys there. Wide receiver, still got a lot of elite talents, Diggs, Hopkins, Ridley. And then running back, because so many quarterbacks have been drafted, we're getting some pretty quality running backs in this spot. Chubb, Gibson, Harris, Mixon, CEH. Depending upon who you like getting these players at the 2-3 turn, pretty nice, to be honest, compared to like a 1 QB league. And at quarterback, we have Tannehill, Stafford, Hurts as the top of the queue. But what do you want to do here with these 2 picks?
So I do like that George Kittle fell to us. He's a player that I've been trying to app a little bit here in drafts. And then the other player who I've been taking a pretty healthy amount at this point in time as well is Trey Lance. Now, the gamble with Lance is that he's probably not going to make it back to us in the 4th round based on his ADP. So why don't we lock in Kittle real quick, just because that's someone who I definitely do want to get. Yep. And then maybe we can walk through this quarterback decision here. You want to stack in best ball, but I think one thing that people need to kind of keep in mind when we're talking about stacking is that we're also not legally required to stack a quarterback with a pass catcher. So you can stack offenses and you can look to build pieces out without necessarily having to get the quarterback. So, I have it pulled up here on my screen too. So I'm just kind of looking my way through it a little bit. It's tempting to go wide receiver and still hope that we get quarterbacks back. I mean, we're definitely going to get quarterbacks back here. So yep. I'm just trying to think, why don't we go with Calvin Ridley?
Yeah, I like it. I'm not so in love with Tannehill and Stafford and Hurts that I feel like the need to draft them here when there's such elite talents at wide receiver left. So I like your tack here, taking Ridley, taking Kittle, locking up that elite tight end gives us. Oh my goodness! Of course, I just closed the draft room, so itchy trigger finger. Let me pull it back up. I'll get us sorted out here soon. But what was I saying? I did get the pick.
So we're good.
But yeah, the nice thing about having Kittle is that it opens up this ability to only draft 2 wide receiver or 2 tight ends. Excuse me. I'm totally flabbergasted by my mistake, by the way. But I really like it. Like Kittle, I agree. Like the way he's slipping so far behind Waller just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. So I'm excited to get him there at the 2-3 turn.
Yeah. Mostly
for what it does to our roster construction. Go ahead.
I was just going to say he's kind of like the McCaffrey pick. It's just another position. You can get him early. You probably don't really have to build out as many at that position as you would have if you would have gotten somebody later or of lesser talent. So now in this case, we got McCaffrey. We probably really don't need to worry about running back unless the value falls to us that we're just in love with. Now we got Kittle. We probably don't have to worry about getting another tight end, even a tight end 2 anytime soon, unless we have a value that we really, really like, or we think that there's just a guy who's going to be poised to explode who could find his way into our flex a couple times a week or a couple times a season. So yeah, I really like the theory behind those early round tight ends and why we get them and what it allows us to do as far as our roster build goes. So George Kittle, I'm all in on.
Yeah, just in general, we have a lot of flexibility to create some sort of advantage with our next two picks. Mm-hmm. We have McCaffrey as the clear-cut RB1. We have Kittle as a clear-cut top 3 tight end. We have Ridley as a clear-cut top 5 wide receiver. So depending upon where the value is with our next picks, we could maybe just take one quarterback and start to stack up an advantage at one of the other positions. We could double tap quarterback. Like, we have a lot of options here. It really depends on what the rest of the drafters in this room do and, kind of what falls to us, right? You really have to react on the fly in these things. And best ball, Superflex best ball, does require you at some point to be like, okay, I have to care about quarterbacks. Like, you can't hope to play the waiver wire at the position or anything like that. Like, you can't wait too long. So that's always going to be in the back of our mind. But I'm okay starting, the dregs of the QB position if it means that I get supreme advantages at the other positions. That's just how I like to draft anyway. So I'm very comfortable doing that here. Is that typically your approach in Superflex, like whether it's best ball or not? Like you mentioned the Scott Fish Bowl. Like who are your quarterbacks in the Scott Fish Bowl, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, that I actually do remember because it was a plan I mapped out kind of going into it, trying to find a way to hopefully distinguish myself from the field a little bit, which I did successfully do. I can't remember my picks right out the gate as far as I want to say I got Jonathan Taylor and George Kittle, but don't quote me on that. I'll pull it up. But I'll tell you who my quarterbacks are. I decided to fade the position a little bit, hoping that a couple things go right for these guys. And I actually got both Trey Lance and Justin Fields as my top 2 quarterbacks. And then the hope was that I'd be in a room that would give me a couple quarterbacks later on that would be usable. Since even now today, we don't know their situation. We definitely didn't know what their situation was at the time of the SFB 11 draft. But I ended up getting Ben Roethlisberger in the 10th round, which I think was like 2 rounds after his ADP. And then a few rounds later, I kind of hedged my Trey Lance bet by going with Jimmy Garoppolo. So I have a 4 quarterback build. Obviously, I can drop, quarterbacks as I need to. So if everything's looking really good for Lance and Fields coming into week 1, I might drop Jimmy G and just go with the 3 quarterback build and add another wide receiver, running back, or something like that. But it's currently Fields, Lance, Garoppolo, and Roethlisberger, and I feel pretty good about it overall. I need a couple other things to hit elsewhere, but I feel good about who I was able to add early on.
Nice. It sounds like we had pretty similar approaches. I ended up with Lance as well, and then I took kind of Ryan Fitzpatrick in that same vein where you took Roethlisberger, right? Kind of the aging vet that nobody really wants. Right. I also took a stab at Tua Tagovailoa, and my kind of late round Jimmy Garoppolo type pick was Teddy Bridgewater. So I didn't get that San Francisco stack, but I got a guy in Denver that could be the starter. I think probably should be the starter because I'm not a Drew Lock believer. But yeah, it sounds like we had pretty similar approaches, at least to waiting on the QB position and seeing who fell to us and kind of pouncing when we thought the value was there. And so that's kind of what we're doing here.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. There's going to be guys who fall, which I don't want to talk too much about who I want to fall or anything like that just yet, but there's going to be a couple guys who fall. We're at the time of year now too where people are being propped up just based on the preseason. Trey Lance, people are going to be bullish on Trey Lance. He actually just went ahead of Joe Burrow here, which maybe is normal for these things, but I feel like that's maybe still
that's the hype. It's filtering in as we speak.
Right. So some of what I was thinking when I was considering taking Calvin Ridley here was the possibility that some quarterbacks could fall based on rookies being propped up. Even Tua just went ahead of guys like Matt Ryan, Kirk Cousins. I got to see who else is on there. But yeah, so there's things happening just based on the preseason right now that if we think about and kind of anticipate these things could happen, can hopefully make our teams look solid going forward. The right guys fall to us, and now we're really got we really got something to work with. So the other thing too is really watching what the room looks like in terms of the board overall. I think we're going to get a good sense by the time we come back around here as to who has 2 quarterbacks, and then we can kind of also make our bets on how many teams are going to go and draft a 3rd quarterback in the 5th round, which I don't think it will be too many. And if that's the case, we can even kind of play out who we think may fall to us at the I guess that'll be at the 6th round. So there'll be a couple things to watch here. Some players I think are falling in some pretty nice spots. The last 2 teams, the 11 and 12, both went quarterback just to make sure they got their guys. I don't hate that, but I feel really good about our core 3. I think what we're looking at right now, the core 3, is 3 potential players who could all be number 1 overall at their position if a couple things break right. Kittle's probably the reach there, but he's still going to be far more elite than even probably like the tight end 5. So I really like Kittle where we got him too.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen Kittle go later than this in this format, but
oh wow,
I don't think you can argue against the pick where we got him. Like, I wouldn't call that a reach based on the tight end premium scoring. Like, the tight end premium format like really does pump up the elite of the elite tight ends. And Kittle, his value is being depressed because he hasn't been a prolific touchdown scorer over the past couple seasons, the way that like Kelsey and Waller have. So like there's that slight amount of recency bias. Plus the little nagging injuries for Kittle last year didn't help either. Like people perceive this gap between him and Waller. And I mean, I guess I do think that there is a drop off. Like if Waller's healthy and if Kittle's healthy, Waller is probably going to get more volume and therefore probably should go ahead of George Kittle. But look at where Waller went versus where we drafted George Kittle. And I mean, I don't think the gap is that wide, I guess is what it comes down to relative to the format. And for what it does, again, for roster construction, only having to draft 2 tight ends now gives us an extra spot to play with for another position. So let's pull the draft room back up here. We are down into the middle class of quarterbacks, and I'm comfortable drafting from this tier. I'm hoping that we don't have to take 2 at this spot, mostly because like you look at the wide receivers that are available right now, and it's still pretty insane. There's a lot of really good players there. Even running back, I like a few of these guys who we're looking at. So there's appeal to not taking a QB here. But again, when you look at the draft board, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 teams that only have 1 so far. So they are going to start to feel the pressure the same way that we're feeling the pressure now to get their second quarterback. The real question is how heavily are these people going to feel the pressure to get their third quarterback? And I would say for the most part, these draft rooms are pretty sharp. Like no one's really egregiously overpaying for their QB3 very often, but it does happen. And so that's something to keep in mind. Like we're not necessarily guaranteed to have people only take 2 quarterbacks for the first 6 rounds or whatever. But we're on deck. 1 drafter here, potentially going to take a QB. We'll see. Do you have a lean position-wise with what you want to do with these 2 picks, Zach?
My lean was Matt Ryan, and it almost worked out for us because my hope was that a couple of those preseason hype guys would get propped up enough that Matt Ryan would fall to us past his ADP a little bit. My idea was correct. He did fall a tiny bit. He just didn't quite fall far enough for us to get him where we wanted to. So if I was to talk about leaning right now, the quarterback room is kind of gross, but then on the other side, we do have options here. So just looking at it real quick at the board, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We only have 6 teams with 2 quarterbacks. So half the board still doesn't have a second quarterback. And I would imagine at least one person is taking a QB3 here. So I'm tempted to go quarterback right now, only because I don't want to be left possibly going with a build where I'm banking on someone who might not play like Jameis Winston or Taysom Hill or something like that later on.
I think that the draft board dictates that we do go quarterback. And the nice thing about doing that is it puts pressure on the rest of the room to draft quarterbacks, which hopefully will push some of the other positions back to us. Even though like there are players here at running back and wide receiver that I like, we've already established a wide receiver is the least important position in this format. The running backs here, while some of them are appealing, like we have McCaffrey. We only need 1 more kind of locked-in starter. I think we can wait to get that. QB is really the limited free agent here. So which 2 do you like?
I like Kirk Cousins as 1. I think that could give us a possibility to do a couple things later on. And then the other one who I want is Justin Fields. We're going to go 3 quarterbacks anyways. At this point in time, the room is not pretty. So I think then when it comes to a pick like this, we got him as a QB19. Justin Fields is probably flirting with closer to a top 12 or top 10 quarterback the second he steps on the field and starts playing. At least that's the hope. He's got the tremendous rushing upside. He has a tremendous arm. He's got Allen Robinson. There's questions around the Bears offense as a whole and how they'll be able to operate. But when Justin Fields got on the field, I came out in the second half. He wasn't so good the first half, but in that second half, he looked really, really good. I think it's going to be difficult for Andy Dalton to hold him off for any more than a month. Hopefully it's far less than that because the Bears need Justin Fields, as bad as we do now. So hopefully we see him sooner rather than later. I think that he's a really, really good value here. The guy in the third round got Trey Lance at QB 13. I don't know that much separates the upside between Lance and Fields that they should be going this far apart. I would think that if you're drafting Lance where you're drafting him at the 311, you probably should have had somebody taking Fields in the mid fourth, early fourth, mid fourth. So the fact that we got him at the fifth, I think even feels like a really good value, just considering some of the other guys who went ahead of him who definitely don't have the upside that Fields possesses.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the thing about the quarterback middle class in general is all these guys are really close in value when it's splitting hairs to some extent. And if I had to nitpick our own two guys here, Cousins and Fields, my concern with both of them is that the volume really might not be there for those two. Kirk Cousins, we know that's going to be a run heavy offense with Dalvin Cook. Justin Fields, I think the Bears are going to limit his opportunities to make mistakes by running fewer plays, playing a little bit slower. And so I do think that's the downside of these two. With Cousins, though, I think maybe unless their defense really improves, they're going to have to throw to some extent. And their receivers dictate that they need to throw a little bit. Like when you have Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson to throw the ball to, you want to get the ball in those guys' hands. So Cousins less concerning to me. Fields a little bit more because of the potential issues with pace, because their defense is actually pretty good, and because he might not be the week one starter. I think he will be starting sooner rather than later. But there is risk in that pick, although I agree that is the discrepancy between Lance and Fields in this draft, does that make sense? It doesn't to me, no. But neither does the discrepancy between Tua and Justin Fields. I think that all these players are ultimately very close in value, and so you kind of have to not necessarily get lucky, but you have to read the tea leaves. You have to figure out which offenses you really want to invest in. And honestly, it comes down to draft position. It's who do you have the opportunity to draft? And in this case, for us, it was Cousins and Fields as kind of the most appealing options at our draft spot. Will we look back on this draft and wish that maybe we had taken Mayfield or Ryan Fitzpatrick over Justin Fields or over Kirk Cousins? Sure. That's definitely possible because, again, these guys are really close in value. But we didn't really have the luxury to wait it out any longer where we were at the turn. So here we go, YOLO.
And look at the quarterbacks now. So we pretty much caught it coming out there. We just had a run of 5 straight quarterbacks, 3 picks after we got Fields at the 501. So you got Baker, Ben, Ryan Fitzpatrick. 2 of those guys got their second quarterback. 106 went ahead and got their third quarterback in Fitzpatrick. I wouldn't be surprised if one more team here coming back added a third quarterback, just because this quarterback room is getting pretty thin quickly. We're already at 24 off the board. So, I think we made the right pick in terms of why we did it. The one thing that I did wrestle a little bit with here, and this is just kind of the way I think about things as I'm drafting. I'm sure you probably do something similar, but knowing that Fields does not have the guaranteed week 1 start, he doesn't have the guaranteed start at all. Knowing that he doesn't, some of the ways I've been trying to kind of protect myself with some of these rookie picks who I expect to play at some point in time, but maybe not right away, is looking at the bye weeks who I pair them with. So Cousins is a little bit more of a risky bye week pairing because he has a week 7 bye, whereas Baker has a week 13 bye. So if something were to happen where Fields really isn't playing for an extended period of time, having Baker at that week 13 bye is a little bit nicer than having Cousins at that week 7 bye, where now we might be looking to really find another quarterback who we're just hoping we can get one quarterback in the lineup come week 7 if for some reason Fields still isn't playing. So I do kind of plan a little bit around those bye weeks, but in general, I don't mind Kirk Cousins here. I think there's going to be some players who we can possibly add with him a little bit later on who are going to make some sense. Looking at Irv Smith, I'll just throw it out there. It doesn't take much to figure out who a Vikings back would look like at this point in time. But so I really like kind of the direction that this is heading. Another quarterback just went off to another team that already had 2, so we now got 2 teams already with 3. We made a good pick here. I think so. Now it's just going to be a matter of seeing where does the value lie at other positions that aren't quarterback, given what we know the quarterback position is going to look like when it gets back to us? We may already have 30 off the board over the next couple of picks.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not too concerned about that idea that, if Fields isn't starting until week 8, then this team is screwed, because in the end, this is still best ball. Like, these are the types of high risk, high reward picks that we make, knowing the format, knowing that we don't care if we finish 3rd or 4th. That doesn't help us. We need to finish first. We need things to go right. And if we believe Justin Fields truly does have that top 12, top 10 upside at the quarterback position, getting him at QB 19 is kind of a no-brainer. Now, with that said, could you say the same thing about Baker Mayfield or Ryan Fitzpatrick or, even Derek Carr, who was surprisingly good last year? Yeah, like all of the quarterbacks in this range kind of have that possibility to outperform their ADP and to, finish as a top 12 guy. It's just with Fields, it's a little easier to see because of the rushing production he provides. Like, you're not getting those rushing stats from Mayfield, Roethlisberger. Fitzpatrick runs a little bit, but definitely not Carr. Like, Daniel Jones does run, but Daniel Jones is so bad at everything else that, like, I don't want to hear that argument for him over Fields. Like, I'm not ready for that. So yeah, like, again, for the upside's sake, trying to finish first overall out of these 12-team leagues, like, and trying to finish first by a lot, like, I do think Fields makes a lot of sense in that spot. And yeah, the bye weeks are a little bit concerning, but it's still a super flex league, not a true 2 QB league. So if the bye weeks don't work out, we have other positions to fill that super flex spot in theory. So yeah, I don't feel bad about it. Coming back towards us here in round 6, end of round 6, beginning of round 7 is where we're picking. And quarterback is already desolate. We have Jared Goff as the only locked-in starter, and Carson Wentz as someone we perceive to be locked in when he's healthy, but we don't know when that's going to be. And then it's potential timeshare guys after that. And there goes Goff. So we're on deck here. I don't think it's worth reaching for any of these QBs because, honestly, like, who's to say whether Wentz, Winston, Newton, Hill, Garoppolo, Mac Jones, Bridgewater, Locke, like, I couldn't tell you with confidence which one of those guys is going to start the most games. So I think it comes back to running back, it comes back to wide receiver. I'll pull up the tight ends actually just to see who's there. We have Kittle. I don't feel a strong need to take a tight end 2 here. Not sure how you feel, but I don't know. What's your lean position-wise here in terms of running back, wide receiver, tight end, or quarterback?
So being the RotoViz guy that I am, that's where I've been for the last couple of years now.
Company man.
I write for 4for4 too, but there's a connection with RotoViz and Zero RB and Sean Siegel and the gospel that is. And we certainly don't have a Zero RB team here. We actually have perhaps the best running back. So we can't call this a Zero RB team, but one of the principles that Zero RB is kind of founded on is also making people pay for not drafting the good wide receivers early. And we are currently sitting on the 72nd overall pick, and we have 3 wide receivers whose ADP is below 72. So I don't like any of the running backs who are necessarily on the board right now, especially knowing that we have McCaffrey in our back pocket. So I'd be really tempted to hammer out two wide receivers here at good value and kind of get our wide receivers 2 and wide receivers 3 in here. And the guys I would personally be looking at would probably be I'd probably go Chris Godwin and T. Higgins, honestly. I'd probably go Chris Godwin and T. Higgins here. Pair them up with Calvin Ridley. I really kind of like their upside. DJ Moore, I do like, but I get concerned that DJ Moore could perhaps be a little bit more of a good in real life NFL player and not a good for fantasy football player. He's not quite arrived to the point that we'd like to see him at just yet, and I don't know that Sam Darnold gives me confidence to be taking him over some of these other guys who we have going here. So it would be Godwin and Higgins for me. I think both are going to be locked into really solid target shares. I think the Bengals are probably going to have 3 wide receivers on the team with 100+ targets, just like they did last season. And I think that, when we're talking about doing a build that's either zero RB or in this case, hero RB, what you're really trying to get is wide receivers so you could envision finishing the top 15 or better. And I think we secured that with Godwin, Higgins, and then Calvin Ridley. So those quarterbacks, it would suck to get locked out of quarterback by the time we get back to it in the 8th round. But if that happened, people were kind of not drafting according to ADP at that point in time. So I would like to think that there's some guys who are going to fall to us at quarterback here, that these wide receivers are more than safe picks and really good upside guys.
I think based on the format, I would have taken a running back there over one of the wide receivers. Now, I don't know which running back I would have wanted in that spot. I think if I pulled up my rankings, my guess is the highest one would have been, or let's just look at who was available there.
There was Josh Jacobs, he just went, and then there was Mike Davis too.
Yeah, I think Mike Davis probably would have been my highest ranked one, but because we have Ridley already, like I wouldn't have wanted to make that pick anyway. So I'm comfortable passing on Mike Davis in that spot. But structurally, based on this format specifically, kind of talking about what we mentioned at the top of the show in terms of reverse engineering, like wide receiver, like we have 3 really good ones now.
Yeah.
We're kind of pigeonholed now into overpaying for running back with our upcoming picks, essentially. Whereas I probably personally would have preferred to played it a little bit more balanced with a running back and a wide receiver there. Again, just my personal preference. That does come from me being like, I'm not really a 0 RB guy, to be honest.
Okay,
and
I was going to ask you. I was going to say, let's figure this one out just so we know. So okay, so you're not big into it.
So I understand the appeal of taking like the elite wide receivers in the early rounds, and I'm on board with that. My hesitancy is specific to this format for the most part, and has to do more with the fact that I'm familiar with how these draft rooms tend to attack the running back position. And so with that in mind, kind of thinking, I kind of want to, I know this is the running back dead zone or whatever you want to call it. Like, I kind of don't care. Like, I still feel like some running backs are going to come out of the dead zone. And I like to think that I'm a good enough fantasy manager to identify guys who have more potential to do that. And I do think Mike Davis is one of those players. I know that he's old. I know that offensive line in Atlanta is not ideal, but who else is taking carries away from that dude? And again, if we're talking about trying to hit on the high upside plays, and not just upside in terms of like performance and elite athleticism, but upside in terms of volume, like Mike Davis to me is one of the more intriguing like volume upside players relative to where he's drafted. How do you feel about Mike Davis in general? Like, I know you are a 0 RB believer, but is he a player that interests you? Because, if you look at where he lands in the 4-for-4 projections, he is relatively high. And I know that, like, for that reason, John Paulson likes him to some extent. A lot of the other folks at 4-for-4 are interested in Mike Davis, but maybe it's a blind spot for me. Maybe it is just like a type of player, an archetype of pick, a running back dead zone pick that I should learn to avoid. But what are your thoughts?
So you mentioned Mike Davis's age, which is definitely a concern. I was drafting some teams before free agency hit. So I don't remember what Davis's ADP was way back in March or April, whenever it was. But before he signed for the Falcons, I was adding him just because I knew he was probably going to go somewhere and hopefully have at least some kind of serviceable role. Landing with the Falcons is just like a godsend in terms of, what you're looking for. That was very unexpected. But the more I looked into Mike Davis, the less high I became on him at his current ADP. In terms of his overall production last season, I was looking at what he did last year, and roughly 50% of his PPR points came in the first 6 weeks of the season. And then weeks through 17, he had his other 50%. So he had a very top-heavy week where he then went and sprinkled in like several, like 8. It's kind of crazy, but he sprinkled in a bunch of like 8-point whatever PPR performances in week 7 through 17, and he only had like 1 or 2 big weeks going forward. So my concern with Mike Davis, because he was still getting all that volume in Carolina, he definitely didn't have the best offense to help him out there. And Teddy Bridgewater was giving a lot of targets to Robbie Anderson, Curtis Samuel, and DJ Moore. But Mike Davis's production really tiered off after week 6, and it never really rebounded except for like 1 or 2 spike weeks. So I actually am more preferential to Quadri Allison late in the draft than I am Mike Davis, just because I think that there could be a scenario where Davis is either, he hits that wall. I think he's going to be 29 this year, if I'm not mistaken. He's at 20 or 29, where he hits that wall. And if that decline in production that we saw in Carolina had anything to do with age, because he was healthy. I mean, I guess every player is injured to a degree during the NFL season, whether they're on the report or not. But he was essentially healthy. and their production tiered off. So I would prefer to make a bet on Mike Davis not producing at the level that we want him to, and perhaps a younger back in Quadri Allison having a chance to seize a little bit more of a role later on down the line. There's already been some news in camp that he's been splitting a little bit of work with the ones, kind of as the backup to Davis. So I really am kind of a fan of Allison at this point in time this season.
Quadri Allison, man, you just made me throw up in my mouth. That's gross. I
Yeah,
mean, where he goes in drafts, to be fair, like at cost, yeah, sure, I'm fine with it. And that might be the type of pick we have to make with this sort of build. I'm curious to see where he does go in this draft, especially now that we've thrown his name out there. Are there any running backs? Are there any running backs in the famed or infamous dead zone that you are interested in? Because again, I do think that it is worth trying to mine that for value, especially if the sharper leagues that you're in are devaluing those players. Like, and we don't have to talk about somebody who's still available that you might want to draft, but if we're looking at, Josh Jacobs, Kareem Hunt, Javonte Williams, Trey Sermon, Chase Edmonds, Myles Gaskin, Damian Harris, like the guys who've been drafted here in the 7th and 8th rounds, do any of them stand out to you as players that you do like?
The one player who stands out to me, I do like Javonte Williams, but Melvin Gordon is still there, so there's that. I think Javonte Williams is still going to play a lot. He's probably a fine pick in the 7th round, honestly. But the one player who I'm actually probably higher on than most people are is Josh Jacobs, and I don't love Josh Jacobs, but some people just have drafting Josh Jacobs in the 7th round as some kind of like disgusting pick, and I'm not quite there on that. I guess I worry a little bit about Kenyon Drake stealing some touches from him and some receiving upside, and I honestly like Kenyon Drake in these best ball drafts because I think John Gruden is going to try to prove that Kenyon Drake was a good signing, and he's going to throw him more passes than he probably deserves. He's going to give him more touches than he probably deserves. But I think that Josh Jacobs, who, if I remember correctly, either led or was close to the top in the league in red zone carries last season, I think he's still going to have a role that the Raiders are going to lean on him a little bit to still make him fantasy viable. And in the 7th round, I would not be at all shocked if wherever we were giving Jacobs, if we look back later on this and at the end of the year and say like, oh yeah, Josh Jacobs is running back 22 was probably a little bit too low because he somehow snuck into the top 12 or top 15 or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the same or a similar argument to the Mike Davis argument, right? It's like, even if you believe Kenyon Drake is going to eat into Jacobs' workload, like Jacobs is still probably the primary ball carrier there. He's probably the primary goal line guy, and that might just be good enough. Like, what separates Josh Jacobs from Miles Sanders? I mean, I guess passing game usage might be a little bit more in Sanders' favor, but I would say Jacobs is still probably a better bet for more overall touches. But we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. I agree that he's a little undervalued, but we're on the clock here. We got 2 picks to make. I don't think we want our QB3 yet, but I don't know.
I really want Claypool there. I really want Claypool there, but we're not going to get him now. I don't want Kenny Galladay. I mean, let's look at running back here real quick.
I mean, can I try to talk you into Raheem Mostert?
I was actually just going to say I wouldn't be against him. Why don't we make that pick? I'm good with Raheem Mostert. If I remember correctly, he sat in this most recent preseason game, which is kind of an indication that he is considered a starter. So
they perceive him as the lead guy, I think, or at least like someone they need healthy for the regular season.
Right. So we like that. I like that pick a lot. And then I'm sorry, I'm just looking through this here real quickly.
Yeah, if you wanted to go wide receiver again, like I like some of these players. I'm not a Galladay guy either, but Robbie Anderson, even Juju, Tyler Boyd.
I do worry that we need to get a quarterback here.
Okay. I mean, yeah, if you want to make that pick, I'm fine with it. This is your draft, Zach.
Only because of ADP, Newton and Taysom Hill might not make it back to us, and we really don't want Deshaun Watson and guys like that. So I would say let's go Taysom Hill with this pick. All right, now, you know what? Let's go with a wide receiver, and let's just go with Robbie Anderson. Let's do that.
Robbie Anderson, I like it.
We'll see here. There's some other quarterbacks who should be there. I don't want to.
Yeah, I feel like we can still wait for one of these other guys, whether it's Jones or Bridgewater or Locke, or if we really want to slum it with one of the Houston guys. Like we're going to have a QB3 available to us with our next 2 picks because most drafters already have 3 or 2 at least. Let's see. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 teams that only have 2, 7 if you include us.
Mm-hmm.
But again, like I don't necessarily know like if the team that has Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers or Justin Herbert and Jalen Hurts, they don't even really need to pay up for a QB3 at this point. And pay up. I say pay up. Like look at who's available. Like,
yeah.
but
they don't necessarily need to get one. When I was doing the Draft Sharks draft the other week, one really interesting thing that I noticed that Ian Hartitz did was he only went with 2 quarterbacks. And
exactly.
I know that we technically have probably worked our way into this idea that if we don't get if we don't get a third quarterback, then our team is screwed if one of those guys goes down. But depending on how much draft capital you're investing in some of these players, your team's probably screwed if one of those guys goes down anyways because of what you passed on to get him. So to do like a 3 quarterback, like I mean, I'm not trying to criticize any teams here, but for me to do a 3 quarterback build with a team like Team 6 where they went Dak, Stafford, and then Fitzpatrick, you've already kind of got your eggs in your basket with Dak. Even Stafford in the 3rd round is a pretty high pick. To run it back and get Fitzpatrick when you don't have any conflicts with bye weeks, which we really shouldn't worry about anyways, but you don't have a bye week conflict. You got players who are hopefully all going to play. I wouldn't be looking to add a 3rd quarterback here. Now, I think in our case, we need a 3rd quarterback, but there's some teams here that I don't think it would behoove them to go with the 3rd quarterback. So I'm hoping that some of these guys make it back to us just kind of based on the logic of their builds and what they're working with right now.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I actually don't mind the Fitzpatrick behind Stafford and Dak start. Like, I'm not going to begrudge anybody in this format from taking a 3rd QB with some amount of urgency because there is no waiver wire. You do not get to adjust your team as the season goes. So, you know, if Kirk Cousins or Justin Fields gets hurt, like it doesn't matter who our QB3 is at this point. Like whichever QB3 we get is probably not going to be enough to make up for that sort of injury. And I think you could make a similar argument. Like even if you have Dak Prescott and Matthew Stafford, if one of those guys gets hurt and you don't have a viable 3rd QB, like that could just tank your team right away. And I think that is one case in best ball where, you know, playing for floor, playing it safe to some extent is a little bit more worth it, especially because the quarterback position scores more points than any other position. That if you happen just to run really good with how the spike weeks line up between your 3 guys, you could just gain a really big advantage by having that 3rd QB, especially if it's a guy, if all 3 of your guys are starters all year. Right. So, yeah, again, I'm not going to begrudge anybody for taking that 3rd QB early. But we just haven't been in the position to take our QB3 yet. Like I wasn't going to take Jameis Winston over Godwin or Higgins, and I wasn't going to take any of the QBs who are currently available over Raheem Mostert and Robbie Anderson. So, yeah, I think that, you know, again, we're playing the hand we're dealt in terms of the draft position. Like, if anything, maybe we look back and say, you know, shoot, maybe we shouldn't have taken both Kittle and Ridley. Maybe one of those picks should have been a quarterback. I don't know. Yeah. But I'm okay seeing how this goes. But let's spin these other teams in a more positive light.
Yeah.
Which of these drafts do you like besides our own team? Because, you know, it's because we're all drafting from our unique positions. Like there can still be other drafts that we think are good, even if they're not ours. But which teams stand out to you?
The one team that really is standing out to me just on the surface here real quick, I would say is the 112. I think they got Zeke at a really nice value. He probably should have been going a little bit higher there. At least I would have taken him a little bit higher there. And then you got Devontae Adams, which is really nice. His 3 quarterbacks, he's making a lot of bets on youth, or they are making a lot of bets on youth with Burrow, Lawrence, and Wilson. But they got 3 very reliable quarterbacks, and they got guys who they're going to need in there. They were able to get a Jamar Chase stack. I see in there they just did a Visca stack with Lawrence, and no stacks with Jets, but those Jets players, so many of them are going
plenty of time to do that. The Jets guys go late,
yeah. They'll throw in like Keelan Cole or something like that, and they'll complete that. So I think 112 is actually doing a very, very nice job. And
I like the Darrell Henderson pick there as well. Like that is a really nice value.
Yeah, that's a really good value too. And then the other team, just trying to look here and see real quick. I honestly like how number 5 started as well with Saquon in the 2nd, Antonio Gibson in the 3rd. I thought was really good. 2 very solid wide receiver 2s, or 2 very solid top 2 wide receivers, and Jerry Jeudy. He essentially drafted him as a wide receiver 3, a high-end wide receiver 3. Would not be at all surprised if he somehow crept into being a high-end wide receiver 2 this season, maybe finishing out the top 15 overall. So I think Team 5 is also very solid looking.
Yeah, I'm just a big Kyler Murray fan, especially in Superflex like that, plus the 2 running backs, Barkley and Gibson after that. Keenan Allen, pretty reliable as a PPR wide receiver. I think you and I both like Ben Roethlisberger as a potential QB value just relative to where he goes. And then, Evans in the 6th round kind of feels like stealing. I've talked about how I'm into Mike Davis to some extent. Judy, Michael Carter, that team's coming together really nice. A lot of these starts are pretty darn good, to be honest. I like what Team 7 is doing. Getting Kelsey in the 1st round is basically always worth it in this format. And then Brady, Carr, Darnold as QBs is a fine grouping. If I love Kyler Murray, it kind of makes sense that I love DeAndre Hopkins. I'm a little higher on him than the consensus this year. CEH, I think, is a risky pick, but when you start Kelsey, Brady, Hopkins, you're not going to get a perfect running back in the 4th round. So I think CEH is about as good as you're going to do in that range. The later picks all look pretty good. So I like what Team 7 is doing as well. But it's coming back to us. Let's pull the draft from back up. And I'm a little tempted still by these wide receivers like Chark, Cooks, Antonio Brown, Mike Williams, Jarvis Landry, Michael Gallup, Mecole Hardman. There's a lot of upside here. If we look at running backs, it's getting really dicey. You know what I mean? We're looking at a bunch of guys who are in timeshares one way or another. Some have a little bit more upside than others. Some have more standalone value than others. But I don't see a big difference, in fantasy appeal between Leonard Fournette, James Conner, Ronald Jones, and the guys further down, say Hines, McKissick, Latavius Murray, Devin Singletary, Phillip Lindsay. There's not something's gonna have to break right for all these players to be good. You know what I mean?
No, I'm with you. I'm looking right now at quarterback because a couple of things that were a little unexpected happened here. Teddy Bridgewater has an ADP of 148, and Drew Lock is about the same. They went in the 9th and 10th round. Someone went ahead and completed out a Lock and Bridgewater stack just to secure the Denver quarterback room. So,
and then the New Orleans quarterback room just went to the number 2 drafter. Winston and Hill both rostered there. So it's real ugly. If we're gonna take one, I think it's just Mac Jones, right?
Yeah, I hate reaching on these guys, but now we're forced into doing it. So I would go with Mac Jones here.
I think we have to. I hate it too, but I'm going to pull the trigger on that pick. But we got 30 seconds to talk through our other pick. Let's try to make it count. What do you want to do with the other one?
The other pick here, there's some great running back values that are coming up here. Not amazing, but not bad either. The thing that I can't help but notice is that wide receiver is still falling.
That's how it happens in these drafts, I'm telling you. So we're going to pick Jones.
Yeah, let's pick Jones here. Do you feel pressured to take a tight end knowing we still have Kittle in our back pocket? I think we're going to go 4 quarterbacks and 2 tight ends. So I don't know that I would necessarily want another tight end right here.
Yeah, this is another spot where I look at the tight ends available and I think they're all pretty similar. I could make a case for Jonnu being a higher tier than the rest of this group. But I don't feel a whole lot of pressure to do that. I think if anything, where we're really feeling pressure is at quarterback and running back. But I don't know. Again, the value's at wide receiver. And then if you want to take our tight end 2 here, I'm fine with that. But I don't know. What are you thinking?
I'm kind of thinking, man, there's so many good values here. All right, why don't we go with Antonio Brown?
Okay. So a little bit of a stack. Where is Antonio Brown? There you are. A stack of the Tampa Bay receivers without Tom Brady. Yeah. Is that something you do a lot in best ball? Because it's actually a strategy that I really enjoy, is saying, okay, I'm going to bank on the Tampa Bay offense being good. And even if I don't have Tom Brady, if I have 2 of his 3 key receivers in Godwin and Brown, I'm going to soak up a lot of consistent scoring across the bulk of the season. That's why it's appealing to me. Is that something you find yourself doing a lot?
Yeah, and when you just consider how scoring works out, you're getting the higher end of the points. That might be an incorrect sentence, but I think you see what I'm saying. You're getting the people who have essentially more points available to them in terms of PPR yards and touchdowns. One of the big games last season was in Week 16 for the fantasy playoffs, where both Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs went off. I had seen several teams who had one team had Diggs, team had Josh Allen, and it was the teams with Diggs that were coming out on the top, even though Josh Allen was going berserk. Because of the PPR format, Diggs was actually being propped up, and I think either scored more points or close to the same amount as Josh Allen did. And it was one of those things where certainly it'd be nice to have both, but you can see a case where your receiver, I guess even your running back, would be able to keep pace of the field, where even if you don't have that quarterback, you're still probably getting as much as, if not more points than the quarterback, depending on just how big of a week they have. And if you like your quarterbacks elsewhere, then I think that you're fine with kind of doing those offensive stacks. If you make bets on good offenses, I don't think you should limit yourself to wide receiver, quarterback. I think it's absolutely fine to bet on high-end wide receivers, and I think Antonio Brown could surprise a ton of people. We just got him at wide receiver 38. I mean, if Antonio Brown was a wide receiver 24, I don't think anyone would be that surprised. I think we're just kind of discounting him because of who we know he has as teammates. But I think Antonio Brown could give us a couple of really big weeks that show that the consensus is just a little bit too low on him.
Yeah, he was just out targeting Godwin, once kind of he got up to speed last year. And that's the fear again with Godwin now. But I don't know, like for me, like I'm still in on Godwin, mostly based on just the youth that he has in favor over Brown. Mm-hmm. But, stacking them up kind of mitigates the risk of both. And that's why I like to do it. I like that point you made about just like looking at which offenses you want to invest in and not really caring if you get to stack with the QB there. Like I look at how we picked Raheem Mostert and George Kittle. Yeah. Kind of would seem to be counterproductive, but the Niners have a really soft schedule this year. Mostert is a home run hitter at the running back position, just one of the fastest players in the league. Kittle, we know what he's capable of. That's an offense I want to be tied to. And if it means kind of having a contrary stack with a tight end and a running back, I'm okay with that, because when Kittle isn't scoring a lot, maybe that means that Raheem Mostert is scoring more points and vice versa. Let's take a quick break here from the analysis of this draft to get some plugs out of the way. As always, on the stream, I like to talk about how if you subscribe at 4for4.com, you will get an FFPC voucher worth up to $35. So you head over to 4for4.com. There's a red subscribe button up at the top right corner of the page. Click that. When you sign up, you'll get a coupon to use on a draft here at the FFPC. If you're a new user, it'll be worth $35. If you're a returning FFP user, it's worth $10. In addition to the 4for4 plugs, I have a personal plug. We're going to talk about the 2 QBs draft guide for Superflex leagues. And this is a labor of love from myself and Salvatore Stefanelli, also 4for4.com. Way back in the day, we started a site called 2QBs.com. We no longer own the 2QBs.com domain. So now you go to superflex.guide to get your copy of the Superflex draft guide for the 2021 season. A bunch of great stuff in the guide. There's a 12-team Superflex mock draft with a lot of like really big names from around the industry, like Mike Clay from ESPN is in there, Scott Barrett from Fantasy Points, all sorts of really sharp people drafting against each other in this Superflex format. A bunch of great articles. Like I did an article in the guide looking back at the industry leagues I played in last year that were Superflex. So one of them was a 12-team Superflex league. One of them was a 14-team Superflex league against a bunch of experts from the fantasy industry. And in both cases, I looked at all of the different teams that made the playoffs in those drafts and kind of how they attack the quarterback position specifically. So what did the team who finished in 6th place do? What did the team who won the championship of the league do? And so you really get to see how many different ways there are to potentially win and how many little sliding doors moments there are in the draft. It's like you look at where a team might have drafted their QB and you say, man, if they had just taken this other QB, like things could have been so different. Like a lot of the times, like you look at where Josh Allen went relative to some other quarterbacks, or you look at where Aaron Rodgers went relative to some other quarterbacks. And that was the difference last year between having, an elite Superflex team and just a pretty good playoff making team. Justin Herbert is the other like huge value that comes to mind. So if you want to see how these really sharp people from around the industry drafted Superflex leagues, my article in the guide is a really good indication of that. And that's just the beginning. There's a huge draft strategy guide in there from Ben Gretsch. And again, all sorts of other great stuff in the guide. Head over to superflex.guide to pick up your copy. It's $11.11 is the cover price in honor of Alex Smith. But if you use the promo code Greg, you will get 11% off to bring the guide down under $10 total. So really good value, really good bang for your buck in terms of what's in there. In addition to all the articles, rankings, auction values, ADP projections, all that stuff is in there too. So check it out. I think you'll like it. Zach, I apologize for interrupting our discussion to try to make a little money on the side here for my little hustle with Sal. But we really put a lot into the guide, so I want to get the word out and let people know that it's out there.
Oh no, you did a good job there. So totally understandable. Do what you got to do. I like the Alex Smith tribute, to be honest with you. Between the pricing and then also the 11% discount is a very nice touch to the whole thing. I think it really draws the spirit of the 2 QB guide completely together with the 11-11 and 11% off. So very, very, very cool there. And while you were talking, I was just kind of looking at how this draft is going, and I'm trying to figure out what we need to do for quarterback here and any potential stacks that we may want to pull together in these rounds, because there's some players who are falling. And there's also
I got to be honest, I don't know if we need a fourth quarterback, mostly because the quarterback options are so bad. But I'm open to the idea if we can, kind of figure out how we want to do it. What I'm going to do in the draft room is I'm going to fill up the queue with a bunch of running backs, again, just so we can compare for the viewers to say, okay, here's the running backs who are available, and then we'll pull up the wide receivers or the tight ends and on the other side. And so you can kind of get this one-to-one comparison. But yeah, I guess, how are you feeling about this squad? Where do you think we need to go next? I guess don't telegraph too much because we don't want to get sniped by anybody in the room with us who might be watching the stream. But what are your general thoughts at this point in terms of where we need to go next?
As far as it goes, I don't hate it at all. I think that it's a very solid looking tier.
So we're on deck here, and
are we all here now? We lost each other for a second. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me all right, Zach?
Yeah. It had reset. I don't know if you heard what I was saying, but let's make this pick real quick, and then we can talk things out a little bit. But man, so I'm with you. I think we don't take a fourth quarterback. Let's bank on these rookies getting some run. And Tyrod Taylor's the only guy I was remotely considering. He's gone. I'm out on the position. Let's go with 3 quarterbacks, I think. Then in terms of running backs, there's wide receiver value in terms of Jarvis Landry, but I don't think we really need to get him. Darnell Mooney's an option with Fields, which could be interesting, but I don't think we necessarily need to get that stack either. I'd probably lean 2 running backs here, to be completely honest with you. I think I'd go just who we have at the top of our queue here. I think I'd go Edwards and Nyheim Hines, and
yep,
I would keep it moving.
I agree. Edwards is probably one of the picks. You could talk me into somebody else over Hines, but if, again, relative to ADP, sometimes you should just take the value that the market or that the room gives you. And yeah. I think Hines is as good a pick as any of these others. He has a little bit more standalone value, which, considering how we weighted on running back, makes sense. So yeah, let's do that. And I do think, relative to what we already had rostered, we really did need to attack running back there. You maybe could have convinced me to take our tight end 2 in that spot, but who we're looking at in this spot at tight end 2, I don't see a big drop off between who's available now and who's going to be available next round. So yeah, the double running back hit was important, I think, there, because we really are set at wide receiver. We have 5 drafted already. If we go back to the typical roster construction, we only really need 6 or 7 wide receivers, considering how much we've paid up for that position. I would be tempted to skimp on it a little bit, but and maybe only draft 6. But because our quarterbacks are so shaky, I think we need to go for a little bit more upside and make sure we get at least 7 wide receivers. But in general, the pressure was definitely more on us there to get running backs, and Edwards and Nyheim Hines are solid. I like it.
Yeah, no, I really like this. I would probably be looking to only add one more running back here personally, and then really go wide receiver heavy and get that other tight end. We know that we're done with quarterback. Like there's not a guy on the board at quarterback who could fall to us or come available that we're going to look at and say makes sense. And we're even in a position now where if we really wanted to go 3 tight ends, I think we could. So we can kind of look at that, but I don't think we need to. Having Christian McCaffrey really doesn't, or having Christian McCaffrey really does give you the option to not go with as many running backs as you might if you didn't have Christian McCaffrey. So McCaffrey RB1 is really, really good. Mostert RB2 I think is nice. Even where we got him as a value at RB30 is I think pretty good too. Edwards has kind of that hopefully bell cow upside if something were to happen to Dobbins, and then Hines just has that PPR role that we hope is going to prove viable regardless of what the other running back situations are around him. Hopefully he has some pass catching upside. I think the only other running back who I'd be looking to pick right now would be a guy who I can make a case for is kind of like a swing for the fences, home run threat late in the draft where he just looks like a tremendous value late, where the scenario that we map out in our minds of him hitting in a big way is one that we can buy into. So wide receiver and tight end is probably where I'm leaning for these next couple of picks. A lot of receivers who I like here right now. And I am all about ready to get loaded up on these guys if you're ready to do the same. Even tight end, like we have George Kittle. George Kittle. I don't think that we necessarily need to get even a tight end with this next pick. Based on ADP, there should be a couple other guys who fall to us, but let's see. Some of these wide receiver names are so good. I'd like to. Obviously I want them all, but I'd like to think that between now and the time it gets back to us, some of them are going to be off the board, and it's going to make our decision a little bit easier. But there's some players who I like that I think are good here. Where are you leaning on everything right now?
Yeah, so I think we do need one more running back, and then we can probably call it quits on that position. Based upon the tight ends who are still available, we might want to take 2, but I would still prefer to only take 1 and allocate that other roster spot to wide receiver. Because you're right, like the wide receiver position is where the value is here. Like there are a lot of guys here who could still be. I mean, Marquise Brown could be the wide receiver 1 on his team, like if and when he gets healthy. Marvin Jones, same thing in Jacksonville. Rondale Moore is not going to be the wide receiver 1 over DeAndre Hopkins, but based upon the offense that he's in, like he might get enough volume to be, a really high volume wide receiver 2 type,
right.
Which is, what you want in a PPR format. Like there are a lot of potential wide receiver 1s and wide receiver 2s still available here. We're not just looking at wide receiver 3s at this point. So that's where the value is. But with that said, like we do need a tight end. It is starting to thin out. Depending upon who comes back, like I might be willing to make that pick. I'm not saying we have to, because again, Kittle kind of makes up for a lot. Like when you start with McCaffrey and Kittle, your assumption is that McCaffrey is going to be in your starting lineup, like what? 16 out of the 17 weeks, and
every
Kittle,
week your buy.
Yeah, totally.
Right,
and that's kind of what you're hoping for. Now, it won't work out quite that well, probably. Like he'll probably maybe be scoring in our lineup 15 weeks, 14 weeks if everything goes right. And then Kittle is kind of the same thing at the tight end position, although receivers in general are more volatile, and tight ends can be pretty volatile too, especially on a team like the Niners that really kind of skews their game plan depending upon the script and the opponent they're facing. So there will be games where Kittle isn't as big a part of the game plan. So we do need a backup for him. And so, I think depending upon who comes back, like tight end might need to be one of our picks. And of course, as we're having this discussion, there's like a little mini tight end run that happens. Cole Kmet, Jared Cook, Rob Gronkowski, Hunter Henry. It only makes sense. Like I know that Roto1, Mike Alexander, I don't know if he's watching the stream, but he's a buddy. So maybe he's watching this and thinking, I have Waller. Maybe I need to get my tight end too. So Hunter Henry, man, I'd like that pick. That's pretty late for him. I understand he's injured, but I'm a big fan of the tight ends in the New England offense this year.
Yeah, I am too. Henry would have been a guy who I would have been eyeing just to add with Mac Jones at this point in time in the draft. The team had the 108. He also has not drafted another tight end. Neither has the 107. Neither is the 106, and the 105 doesn't have a tight end. So Looking at this board,
we might get hammered here.
Yeah, we could really get hammered here, or people are just going to say that they're going to keep on fading the position because at this point in time it's already kind of some pickings. But I need to correct myself. Gannon did already have one tight end, but 6 only has 1 and 5 has 0. So yeah, I'll be interested to see who actually makes it back to us. I do think that at the turn one of these picks has to be tight end.
I did just notice that Roto1 only has 2 running backs, Derrick Henry and Trey Sermon. Like that, to me, is pretty bold. I like it because, I mean, look at the wide receivers he's got. It's pretty amazing. He's got a really robust Niners stack going. Like him and his team and our team are like the only 2 teams that have 49ers on them. He's got Trey Lance, Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, and Trey Sermon, and Jimmy Garoppolo. So he's got the QB stack there for the Niners. And we've got Mostert and Kittle. And that's it. So, man, good on us. We both really like the Niners, it seems.
Yeah, maybe he'll add. Maybe he'll even go get crazy and add Wayne Gallman or something like that to really bring that thing into to really round that stack into completion. He's got them all though. I mean, I love the 49ers offense. Like you said, super easy schedule. And I know this isn't a tournament, but even in terms of the tournament at the FFPC, 49ers have probably the softest playoff schedule in terms of fantasy playoffs. So I'm really big into the 49ers in terms of fantasy playoffs as well. So, go get your Niners all you want. I'm really into them. I think they're very solid picks here. Are we up?
We are on deck, and the drafter in front of us only has 1 tight end. It wouldn't surprise me if that's the direction that they go. They did not. They took Alexander Madison. So I think we should take a tight end here. Oh, okay. Terrace Marshall is definitely one of your picks. I like it. Another little stack without the quarterback with Marshall and Robbie Anderson.
Yeah.
And we are getting Marshall at a relative value here compared to ADP. So that's nice.
I think his ADP in another week is going to be higher than what it is right now too. So he's been getting so much buzz. So Marshall, I think, is a slam dunk pick here. And then
you want to go tight end?
Yeah, tight end for the next pick, I would say. Where I'm seeing his name, but I'm not seeing.
Who are you looking for?
He must have gone. Did Blake Jarwin go? He must have gone.
Yep, Jarwin got drafted. Looks like 4 picks ahead of us.
Jarwin got
for
drafted.
Me, it comes down to Ferkser, who didn't have a great kind of snap count in his first preseason game, or we make the gamble on Ertz. Because it seems like maybe he's going to stick in Philly. My estimation of his preseason usage was that they are trying to showcase him for a trade still. But if he stays in Philly, he's going to be used there. If he ends up somewhere else, hopefully he'll be used there. At this point, I think I want him to stay in Philly for his fantasy value, but I don't know. I think there's an argument for him, Ferkser, or maybe Ebron. I don't really want anybody else.
Ebron is the pick for me.
Okay.
Yeah, and the reason I'll say it that he is the pick for me is kind of what you mapped out in terms of Ferkser. Ferkser was listed as a backup on the depth chart. That might not mean anything. I mean, it's a preseason depth chart. He could very well be the starter, but I don't know just how good Anthony Ferkser is. I don't know if he's a player who we're trying to will into being good, and maybe he's not as good as we want him to be just because his name is fun to say or something like that.
Ferk Daddy, yeah.
The Ferk Daddy, yeah. And then in terms of even how the Titans use Jonnu Smith, he never really realized his full potential in that Tennessee offense. Now I know Smith is gone. He's in Atlanta now. Maybe they're going to do a few things different this time around, but Ferkser I'm a little bit concerned about just from an opportunity standpoint, and then also the competition around him and just not knowing how good he is. Ertz, I think, is in all likelihood going to be the tight end 2 in Philadelphia, and he's only a tight end 1 if he gets traded, but who knows if that's going to happen. Ebron, I don't foresee any real competition. They have Pat Freiermuth, who they drafted this year, who is, I believe, a relatively good tight end prospect, but I don't really see him taking a tight end 1 role in year 1 for the Steelers as long as Ebron is healthy. So I think Ebron is kind of the safer bet. at this spot in the draft. And we've seen him do it before. Ebron's a pretty solid tight end who tends to not be as appreciated as he should be. Even now, his ADP is not very reflective of probably where it should be. I could see him outperforming a number of the tight ends who are going ahead of him right now, just based on what he did last season. So I really like Ebron. I don't know if you like him much more or perhaps much less than Firkser or Ertz, but that's where I am at this spot in the draft. He's usually my go-to guy around this area.
Yeah, no, I'm interested in Ebron, and I haven't drafted him that much, so I'm kind of excited to get him in at least one of these best ball drafts, so that's nice. With that said, I probably would have taken Firkser ahead of him just personally. Okay. You mentioned how Ebron doesn't have a whole lot of competition at the tight end position. He does have a lot of competition from every other player on his team, right? They have 3 good wide receivers there with Deontay, Claypool, and Juju. They have Najee Harris, who's going to bite into that workload. Like, they're just going to be running more and passing less than they did last season. So I think Ebron's going to be more of a roller coaster ride this year than he was last year. With that said, Roethlisberger does like to use the tight end in the end zone. Ebron is a good red zone threat. Like, I think in this sort of build where we have Kittle as kind of our anchor at the tight end position, like getting a guy who's just a touchdown bingo player like Eric Ebron is fine. Right. Firkser, I think, Johnny's not there, but they brought in Julio Jones. And so I think that Julio is going to see a bigger target share than Corey Davis did last year. Firkser should soak up most of the Jonnu Smith targets in theory, but if he's only in there as a receiver and not being used as like a blocking tight end or a combo tight end, that really hurts his value. And again, that's kind of what we saw in the preseason of the first game for him. That's what the depth chart indicates. Not that depth charts mean anything right now, but there is a little bit of worry there. So I understand fading him to some extent. I think Ertz was the one who was like the most intriguing to me, just because like we know he's a good pass catcher, and potentially I think could get more volume than either Firkser or Ebron if he stays in Philly. If he ends up somewhere else, like the volume's a lot less guaranteed, and you're also dealing with that, receiver changing teams aspect, which is not appealing at all this late in the offseason. Like if Ertz had been traded back in, April or May, I'd feel a lot better about him, like integrating into a new offense. But this late, if he gets traded, like even if it's a team that needs a tight end, I'd still be concerned that it's going to take him a while to get it going. Now, again, this late in the draft, if you already have, say George Kittle on your roster, maybe that doesn't matter. Maybe you don't need Ertz to get going until week 7 or 6, whenever Kittle's on bye. I think they have a week 6 bye. But yeah, I think there's arguments to be made for all 3 of them. And kind of getting back to what I said at the top of my comments here, like I haven't drafted Ebron much, so I like getting some exposure to him. So if he hits, this is great. If he doesn't, then, so it goes. That's how best ball works sometimes.
Yeah. I guess now the question would be, do we go with the third tight end? Because there's another tight end who I do really like as well. Maybe I have him in the queue. I'm gonna take him out of the queue because if we pull that thing back up, I don't need someone else getting wise to it. But there's another tight end who I also like as well. Rather late, who I think could be a sneaky pick. I've taken him in a couple of my other drafts. So if anyone's sitting here listening to our draft right now and had caught some of the drafts earlier, you've definitely seen me take this guy. But just another guy who I like. And then my other question would be, we probably do need another running back, right? We probably need a 5th running back, and I definitely want another wide receiver. I actually have a wide receiver who I'm eyeing up right now, who I can't believe. Yeah,
we've got 3 picks left. I think if we kind of taste the rainbow, we go Skittles with one of each. Like that makes sense to me, considering that we waited so long for a tight end 2. Getting a tight end 3, if there's like one guy we like, and I do think of the names available here, there are, I would say 3 or 4 that I'm interested in, or I think are viable late round best ball picks. At running back, we are in the deep dregs. All of these guys are backups, but with that said, it takes one injury for a backup to become a starter. So that's, again, you talked about this earlier, kind of painting that picture of what does the ascension of one of these players into an RB1 look like, and I think you can make the case for a lot of them. Wide receiver, I mean, there are a ton of really viable players available here. And like,
honestly,
this is where kind of we come back to that reverse engineering discussion we had earlier. Like, I kind of want one of these earlier wide receiver picks back. Like, maybe Robbie Anderson should have been a running back. Frankly, like maybe Chris Godwin or T. Higgins should have been a running back. And I think I mentioned that at the time. Like, when we took these two wide receivers, like my gut said one of these picks should be RB. But this is a little bit more of a hyper fragile approach. We have McCaffrey that makes up for a lot. So I think we're generally okay. But you can see what I'm talking about now. Like, the wide receiver position is where the value is in rounds 16, 17, 18. And we're kind of getting punished by that because we paid up for wide receiver.
Yeah. I mean, I think most of our wide receivers, we still did get an ADP, though, at least. So that in terms of that, that's good. But the rest of the board has definitely been pushed down a little bit, but that was, I think, in part due to some of where these quarterback picks have gone. Some of these quarterbacks went much earlier than they were supposed to based on ADP. The ones that stand out to me in particular are just Locke, Bridgewater, Taylor, and Jimmy Garoppolo. Andy Dalton is gone. He's much earlier than his ADP. And even Mac Jones, we essentially reached a little bit on Mac Jones based on how the quarterback room was shaping up. So, I mean, I'm fine with it. This is very much how I tend to draft. So, it's not super outside of what I'm looking to do here. I think in terms of some of the earlier wide receiver picks, maybe being running backs, I would have considered doing that if I didn't have the floor of Christian McCaffrey. But I'm really actually digging how this team is shaping up overall. And now I'm kind of just hoping that some of these wide receiver values fall to us a little bit further, and we can make some picks here. I've got a couple guys in mind that we'll run them by you and see what we think, because I mean, wide receiver is just tremendous right now.
Yeah, for this late in the draft, like the quarterback, like you said, the quarterback runs early have pushed a lot of these wide receivers down. So even if we wait until our last pick, we're still going to get a viable, like a better, like last pick wide receiver than we might have gotten otherwise. But what do you want to do here? Do you want to take a stab at a running back or a tight end? I'm curious to know which tight end you were eyeing up earlier. If it was Dan Arnold, O.J. Howard, or Hayden Hurst, they are all gone. And Hayden Hurst was the one I kind of had my eye on, but
it was none of them.
Okay.
So let's get to tight end who I want to get real quick. There's a chance he could fall to us in the 18th round, but I kind of really want him, and I don't want him to fall. He should be here. Dalton Schultz is who I want as our tight end 3. Blake. Let's see. Is he still there?
He is still there.
Yeah. I don't think there's any reason. Yeah, Dalton Schultz, right? The rookie from last season who
we got him.
Yeah.
So I'll pick him, and then we got our choice between running back or wide receiver at this point.
So this wide receiver pick of mine would be a reach, but it would also give us a stack, and it's probably not a reach based on his ADP. The math probably actually adds up perfectly, but it would be Jacoby Myers. There's just a lot of really good names who are ahead of him, but we have Mac Jones, and Myers is reportedly working as the Patriots' wide receiver 1.
I love that pick.
At least seeing a lot of volume. So even though there's some really sexy names on here, I kind of want to just get the stack with Mac Jones, and he's not a bad pick here. And then I think we'll just see kind of what running backs shape up when we come back. The one running back who I said I liked earlier, I saw that he was still on the board. I wouldn't be surprised if he stayed on the board, given how heavy this running back room is so far. And if he falls to us, I would have no problem closing that out. But just getting back to Dalton Schultz, the Jarwin news has not been glowing. It's not necessarily been awful, but it's also definitely not been good. And when you're talking about a tight end premium format like the FFPC is, Schultz is going virtually undrafted, and I don't think it makes a lot of sense, honestly. I'd be taking him a little bit higher than I would some of these other tight ends, who are even on the board right now, just in the off chance that he somehow is able to play. So I'm not going to get crazy on him, but knowing that he's getting undrafted, if there's not a pick who I love in the 16th or 17th round, as we did here, I'm not going to wait to the last round to get him and bank on someone else in the draft room not being as quote unquote woke as we are. So I'll just get Dalton Schultz here and hope that he turns into a really solid pick, who I think last year he put up like 70 catches for 600 some yards and a few touchdowns. My direct recall of the numbers is not that strong, but I believe that was the ballpark of what he did last season.
I have no recall at all of his stats, so you're way ahead of me, Zach. I appreciate you bringing the stats. I like it. And again, if the news on Jarwin was a little bit better, I'd feel better about, or I'd feel a little shakier about that pick. But you can't really argue with or you can't really. There are too many nits to potentially pick with any tight end you take in this range. So is how much better or worse is Schultz than Hayden Hurst or Mo Alley Cox or whoever else you might have taken in that spot? Give me the guy who's in the really good offense in Dallas. Give me the guy who was relatively productive last year. Give me the guy who's potentially playing, or his value is depressed because Jarwin is perceived to be coming back and into a starting role. But if Jarwin's not all the way back, Schultz has a lot of potential to outkick this coverage, to really outperform where we drafted him. So I really like that pick. The Myers pick, I love. Stacking him with Jones, makes a lot of sense. We are playing from behind at quarterback. We did not spend up very much at the position. And so if we are going to run hot and win with Kirk Cousins, Justin Fields, and Mac Jones, having stacks is an easy way to do that. I kind of think back to when we were considering a Darnell Mooney stack. I can't remember who we took over Mooney, but I was a little in the back of my mind. I was like, maybe we should have taken Mooney there. But what we did just now with Mac Jones and Jacoby Myers, thumbs up. I love it. This is really good.
I think we passed on Mooney for Edwards and Hines, if I remember correctly. I think it was Edwards and Hines we passed on Mooney for. But, stacking makes a lot of sense in best ball in general. But like you said, playing from behind the quarterback position, we need these guys to be successful for us to win. We're making bets on them being successful based on our build. So why not bet on a couple of other pieces in that offense that they're going to get there and they're going to do it as a unit. And then when it comes to Schultz, even, I think it's another interesting thing to just consider. I pulled up the stats, by the way. Last season, he had 63 catches for 615 yards and 4 touchdowns. I don't know quite what that works out to in terms of FFPC scoring, but it should be very good. And if he gets a chance to do that again this year, that's tremendous. But we have no problem doing a draft with Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry, and that's basically only because they were both brought in by the Patriots this year, and that's what we want because that's what we think is good and ideal for fantasy purposes. But in terms of talking about this Dallas team, we know that they have 2 good tight ends. We know that Schultz is good. He had 615 yards last season. We know that Blake Jarwin should be good. We just haven't gotten to see quite as much of it as we have Schultz. But if the idea is that he is going to be good, I don't think that the Cowboys are just going to move Schultz completely off the field. He's probably going to have a role even if Jarwin is healthy, where he is going to give you a usable week here and there, and he could very well pay off at his current ADP where we just got him at was tight end 30. So, we look for little excuses within a couple of offenses to draft more than one tight end in that offense. The Patriots are one of them. There's arguments for Gronk and O.J. Howard, which I don't personally like that because I still worry about O.J. Howard's Achilles. But there's arguments that we try to make for drafting 2 tight ends in an offense, and I think it's kind of interesting that in one of the absolute best offenses in the league, we're pretty much only interested in injured Blake Jarwin, who hasn't done much in camp, but we are just completely fading Dalton Schultz at the expectation that Jarwin's going to be back. And Jarwin has never even had a season as good as Dalton Schultz has. So, I think Schultz is one of the best undervalued players currently going in drafts and FFPC formats right now. When you're talking about tight end, I have a little bit of conviction when it comes to taking him for sure.
Yeah, I think you can make similar arguments for Hurst, who went right before our Schultz pick, being in an offense that's probably going to have to throw a lot. Their defense is not very good in Atlanta. They're going to be playing catch up a lot, and as good as Kyle Pitts is supposed to be, he's primarily a receiver. Hurst is going to be that kind of dual usage tight end, which means he's going to be on the field a little bit more, or a little bit more than I would say his ADP projects for. And so if he's out there for that many snaps, if he's running enough routes, he only needs to catch, 4 or 5 touchdowns maybe to pay off at his ADP. Yeah. And it's not like Russell Gage is a great wide receiver too. He's fine. And who do they have behind him? Zacchaeus?
Zacchaeus.
I mean, Hurst could very well be one of like a lot more used than people are expecting. And I think that's kind of the same argument for Dalton Schultz is the same argument for Hayden Hurst. So I think those guys going back to back is pretty appropriate.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Hurst is right in that line with that. I'm completely with you there.
He was the one that I would have made the argument for if it made it back to us. But yeah, we ended up with Schultz, and I like it. We are coming up on Mr. Irrelevant. Last pick of the draft is going to be made by us. I do want to quickly chime in and say that I mentioned how Roto1 only had 2 running backs through most of the draft, the person here in the 11th spot, and closed out the draft with just a bunch of handcuff types, Tevin Coleman, Chuba Hubbard, Kenneth Gainwell, Javian Hawkins. Like, it's not a 0 RB team, but it's like using a 0 RB tenant, and I just want to call that out. I think that was well done, Mike.
Yeah, no, I like that a lot as well. Coleman, really nice option too, just because he another player who sat in week 1 of preseason with the expectation that he could be staring at a starting role at least out the gate. So I like that a lot.
So do you think we need to go 5th running back here? I think we kind of do, even though I hate just kind of all the options that are available to us. Like, I'll just throw some of the queue that I think are at least interesting, like Ty Johnson, Jerick McKinnon. Maybe that's it. I guess Marlon Mack, we have to at least throw him a bone. Other than that, like, what are we doing here? Like, who can you make the case for in this group of running backs this deep in the draft?
Sure. So Jerick McKinnon would have been one who I would have considered. Looks like he just went. After that, the one who I'm next highest on is actually Anthony McFarland over these guys. I do like Marlon Mack. I know that he could possibly come back and hopefully show that the Achilles injury is not detrimental to him. But Anthony McFarland is a player who I liked last season when he was drafted by the Steelers out of Maryland. I believe they got him in the 4th round. He has a little bit of pass catching upside. He also showed out a couple of times at Maryland in the Big Ten. He had one game against Ohio State where he rushed for nearly 300 yards. Just a very solid player, decent athleticism, and likely to be the Steelers' number 2 running back. And we've seen that number 2 Steelers running back be very valuable in fantasy several times over. So assuming that he does make it, I'm sure that he's probably going to get some work just because, not too many running backs are ever seeing 100% opportunity share. McFarland may be able to see a couple of passes or touches, even if Harris is healthy. But I do like McFarland's upside in the event that Harris were to go down. I think that he could. I think he's likely to break camp as a running back too, and I like his upside. I was a little bit disappointed, honestly, that the Steelers went out and got Najee Harris. I wish they would have given McFarland a chance at least this year to show what he's got.
I think that's the biggest argument against McFarland is that if they thought he was going to be good, why draft Najee Harris? There are a lot of reasons to question them drafting Anthony McFarland, or not anything. There are a lot of reasons to question the Steelers drafting a running back where they did, just because in general that's not where you want to be picking your running backs. But we'll see. Like, in terms of like a handcuff type, I do think he's like more appealing than Benny Snell, just because he's a little bit more of an unknown. So yeah, it's an interesting pick. I don't know how much I like drafting 2 low-end Steelers like Ebron and McFarland together, but I mean the argument for both of them it works. Let's do a quick audit of the draft from here. We talked about some of the teams we liked. Are there any, like, kind of seeing how the rest of the draft played out? Like, do you want to like put your final stamp of approval on any of these other teams?
Let me just take a quick look over them here. I know that 5 I had mentioned that I did like, so let me just see how 5 closed it out. We could kind of look at around the 9th or 10th round where they had Michael Carter. Then they got Tyler Boyd and Mike Williams. I did like that they went ahead and got Tyrod Taylor as a 3rd quarterback. I think he's probably going to give you some weeks. I personally wouldn't have gone with the 5 quarterback build. I probably would have stopped at just 3 quarterbacks after Taylor. They were in really good shape there. But they do have some other players who I like in there. I do like Philip Lindsay a lot. I was considering Jarwin. They only drafted 1 tight end. That's not really ideal. So,
I think that's what kills that team for me is the 1 tight end and it being Jarwin.
Yeah, 5 got off to a really good start, and then they drafted 2 quarterbacks after Taylor where they didn't need it. So I'll be curious to see how that one plays out. And then Roto1, you mentioned them, and then I remember the other one I mentioned was 12. So why don't we just look at 11 and 12 real quick since you'd pointed out Roto-One, and then I had said 12 was another team I liked. Roto-One, Darren Waller, Derrick Henry, super solid start there. Trey Lance, I love him. Lance would have been my pick in round 4, I guess, because we obviously passed on him in round 3. So Lance would have been my pick in round 4 if he would have made it back to us. He did not, which is why we ended up going with Kirk Cousins instead there. But I do really like Lance a lot. Tua Tagovailoa, great pick with Lance. I think Tua is solid. Robert Woods, Tyler Lockett, Brandon Ayuk, Trey Sermon. This is the all 49ers team. I forgot about that. Ayuk, Sermon, Samuel. Super invested in that offense, but it's a great offense to be invested in, like we talked about earlier. Will Fuller and Curtis Samuel are nice. Some training camp concerns with them, but hopefully nothing too big. Jimmy G, just to kind of hedge on Lance, I think that's fine. Corey Davis, Hunter Henry, and then you just closed it out with a lot of zero RB targets at running back between Tevin Coleman, Chuba Hubbard, Kenneth Gainwell, and Javian Hawkins. You might be a RotoViz guy, Jeff, and Javian Hawkins. That's a big RotoViz guy there. So if you are, good for you. And then the 112, Zeke, Adams, Joe Burrow, Trevor Lawrence, great. Darrell Henderson, tremendous value. Zach Wilson should start every game. Jamar Chase, Deontay Johnson's Visca. Yeah, I think 112 is very solid.
Really good team. Yep.
Yeah, I think 112 is really, really solid. So
I don't usually like this many teams at the back end of the draft, but I like what Beltalowda did here at the 10 spot as well. Like for a drafter who didn't take a running back in the first 4 rounds, to stack up 2, top 8 quarterbacks in Wilson and Rodgers, to get Metcalf and Brown, Metcalf stacked with Wilson is really nice. I really like AJ Brown, and then really didn't give up too much at running back. Like DeAndre Swift, say what you will, he could catch a ton of passes, might not score that many touchdowns, but should be a good volume play. David Montgomery, kind of the same thing. Javonte Williams, you mentioned how you like him. I like him as well. And then Fant, Everett, Gronk at tight end is fine. Locke and Bridgewater together as the QB3, I think is interesting. I'm the type of player who just would bet on one or the other, and for me it's Bridgewater, but Locke looked good in his preseason games, so maybe it is best just to kind of take them both and get whatever they give you. And then what I really like about this team are these late picks, like Rondale Moore, Damian Williams, Gabriel Davis, Jalen Reagor, Amon-Ra St. Brown. There's a lot of upside, again, raw talent upside with Gabe Davis, Jalen Reagor, Damian Williams, Rondale Moore, and then raw volume upside too with those guys, especially Reagor and St. Brown. They could just see a lot of targets, Rondale Moore too, and kind of really outperform these draft picks. This is kind of my ideal way to approach wide receiver in this format is make sure you get yourself 1 or 2 studs, and there are plenty to go around. You could look at kind of what some of these other drafters did to see what that looks like. And then in the middle rounds, really solidify your other positions, because you know that the wide receivers in the late rounds are going to be there for you. So just in terms of structure, I think this team makes a lot of sense. Even if you don't agree with all of the player valuations, I don't know, maybe I would have taken Hunter Henry over Rob Gronkowski. Or maybe I would have not taken both Locke and Bridgewater. But again, it makes sense why you would do that. Structurally, I really like the way that this drafter approached the format. So that's another one I want to shout out. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, my only knock on that team would have been that they got quarterbacks Locke and Bridgewater about 3 rounds earlier than ADP, but the wide receiver value that showed up later on in the draft is kind of unprecedented as well. So where I would have said they lost the wide receiver value with reaching on their quarterbacks like they did, and they did. There's some good names up there. I think they kind of made up for that at the end of the draft with the wide receivers who they selected. So I think that was actually a pretty solid finish given where they took their quarterback. So I don't hate it at all.
Let's go back to our draft one last time, and let's kind of nitpick our own selections. Which, in hindsight, which one of these picks would you change? We talked about maybe taking a running back here at the 6-7 turn. We talked about some potential other changes. Is there one part of our draft that you would change if you could, kind of seeing who went after and saying, oh, you know what, take that player that, this person got a few picks later and put them on our team, and I like our squad a lot better. I think that there are a lot of potential places to kind of second guess ourselves. So I don't want to get too far in the weeds here, but if you could maybe do one pick over, does something stand out to you?
Well, the one that stood out to me where we got Chris Godwin at the 6th, I guess we're the 6-12 because that's at the turn, and the odds are 1. So the 6-12 where we got Chris Godwin, the guy who I was hoping would fall to us was actually Travis Etienne. Etienne's ADP I think was just below. I think it was like 58 overall. I had said on the screen, so it was like 58 overall, and whoever got him at a really good value. What's that, like pick like 66 overall? So the guy whoever got Etienne got him at a really nice value. In terms of other players who are on the board, I'm not taking any of those running backs who went after Godwin over Godwin personally. So, and I mean the same would go for Higgins too. I probably would have tried to look to see if there's a spot where I could get a quarterback value that I liked a little bit more.
I just don't think the room gave it to us, man. Like I was trying to figure that out too. It's like, are we taking Jameis Winston over one of these wide receivers? Like I'm not. Right. Maybe we take Mac Jones and another quarterback with Robbie Anderson. Like that might have been the way to do it. Oh no, wait, that's not right. Because that's not the way the draft was flowing. So yeah, it's like we would have had to take Locke, Bridgewater, Newton, or Hill instead of Raheem Mostert or Robbie Anderson. And I'm not taking back that Mostert pick. Like that was a necessity in my mind. So like maybe we give up Robbie Anderson to take another QB in that spot. But this is one of those cases where if I say, okay, let's say we take Taysom Hill or Cam Newton here at 9.01, like maybe that means Mac Jones doesn't even make it back to us, right? Because these other drafters who took QBs, they have to react. And maybe they take Mac Jones instead of the player we took. So I don't know if that, like changing the Robbie Anderson pick would even help us in that way. Like, I just don't think it does. I think maybe if you want to say that we should have taken another quarterback, you could make the case that we should have taken Tyrod Taylor, Deshaun Watson, or Davis Mills, like taking one stab at the Houston quarterback group somewhere in the later rounds, or taking Andy Dalton to kind of as insurance for Justin Fields. I don't like the Dalton pick. I don't think that makes sense. Like, again, kind of getting back to what we said when we made the Justin Fields pick, we take Fields assuming he's going to be the starter early in the season. Otherwise, like, this team's bad anyway. Like, we don't need to worry about it. But, like, maybe we take Taylor over Antonio Brown. See, I wouldn't do that either. Like, I guess the argument is, for Deshaun Watson, or we could have had Davis Mills with the last pick of the draft. Yeah, so I mean, I think that's where we could have changed at QB. Like, otherwise, the argument is like, give up Kittle or Ridley or McCaffrey, even like take Mahomes over McCaffrey. And I mean, no, I'm not doing that. So I don't think like it's. I feel bad being like, no, I'm right. Like, I know how to do this, and there's no other way it could have been done. Like, that's I don't want to seem that bullheaded, but I really feel like we played the quarterback position relatively correctly in this particular draft room. It's just that the draft room punished us in many different places for, kind of where we were and what quarterbacks we had.
So Ferris Gonsman, I think is how you say their name in the chat. They made the point that I was going to make. Honestly, the thing that I would change is I would have had people not taking quarterbacks 3 rounds earlier than ADP, quite frankly, because none of these guys who we're passing on, like, it doesn't, like, in no world, you're not going to find a draft where you're taking Robbie Anderson over Drew Lock. So doing that would not have actually made sense, Superflex or not. Like, their ADPs don't reflect in a Superflex format right now that anyone is doing that. So, Teddy Bridgewater had an ADP, I think it was like a 158. He went just before 120th overall. So that's like that. Those are super early picks. And even Mac Jones, we talked about earlier, we didn't even take him where we wanted to because of the way these other quarterbacks are being pushed up. So if I was to change anything, I think that I'm actually happy that we stayed committed to not being completely backed into what kind of turned out to be a bad early QB room. And we were willing to take the perceived values that we thought fell to us until it kind of came down to the last minute where, twist our arm, we take Mac Jones a little bit earlier than ADP, but that's because the way the room is setting up, we just don't have many other options available to us. By the time we took Jones, Teddy was already off the board. He was who I was considering, which, again, still would have been earlier. I didn't even hate Newton or Taysom Hill, but Mac Jones I thought was fine given what we were seeing, and I really liked the way that we kind of captured value and added usable pieces to our offense. They're both to our team. They're all offensive players. We added usable pieces to our team in a quarterback heavy room that was adding a quarterback 3 very, very early, before the double digit rounds, where that quarterback 3 is not even going to see your lineup every week. So I really like the way that we kind of countered that by trying to find usable weekly players and still hopefully find good quarterback value, which if these guys start, I think we'll be fine.
Yeah, and I think the last kind of major point to make on this particular topic is that it is super flex. It's not 2 QB. So right. Even if Fields and Mac Jones aren't starting in week 1, we're going to have other players that go into that super flex spot. And if we feel like we got good value on those players, which, relative to ADP, we did, then those guys that we drafted at the other positions hopefully will score well enough in week 1, in week 2, however long it takes us to get one of these other QBs into our starting lineup. Like the rest of the value that we stacked up at wide receiver, hopefully will carry us through those early weeks. So it's not ideal, but it's what the draft room gave us. And so I'm fine with that. Last thing I want to ask you about before we go is just look at the relative order that the quarterbacks went in, Zach. And is there anything that you really disagree with? Are there any quarterbacks that you think went too high relative to the position? Like we talked about Lance being a bit of a reach, relative to hype. I think I'm still taking Trevor Lawrence over him, for example, because I know Lawrence is going to be the starter all year. Burrow, I think, is a little bit closer for me, but I still probably want Burrow over Trey Lance. But that's probably about the breaking point. So, he went, 2 quarterbacks higher than I would take him. And with that said, all those guys were drafted back-to-back anyway. So it's does it really matter? And especially if Roto One knew he wanted to do a heavy Niners build, then yeah, that's where you have to take Lance probably. Maybe. I don't know. Does anything else like that stand out to you in terms of the order in which the QBs themselves were drafted? Who was undervalued, who was overvalued? What do you think?
Honestly, and this is just kind of, these guys are all so close together, so it's just worth mentioning because you don't see it often, I suppose. But Lamar went as a QB5 after Dak and Kyler, which I feel like you don't see as often. Usually, I feel like Lamar is closer to the QB3 off the board, so he fell, I suppose a little bit in this draft technically.
Let me interject real quick. How do you parse those first 5 quarterbacks? Because I think that's an interesting topic of discussion for Superflex is, do you have Murray or Prescott or Jackson as your QB3 or one of those guys your QB2 over Josh Allen? What's your top 5 look like at quarterback?
Honestly, I've not even thought that much about it just because I really don't mind getting any of them. Mahomes is the one I'm probably most generally out on just because his ADP in a 1 quarterback league at least is about round 3. So I think that's a little bit early when I think that any of those other quarterbacks going after him could very feasibly outperform him. Dak is a slam dunk case to outperform Mahomes, just looking at his points per game from last season before his injury. If that would have continued, Dak would have been the overall quarterback 1. So, as far as that goes, I think that there's a good case to be made for Dak. He's injured right now, so there's a little bit of concern there. But for me, I think it would probably be Mahomes, Allen. I would then split hairs between Kyler and Lamar. I think on TMAP the other day, I think I went with Lamar. I think I went with Kyler over Lamar, so I'll stay consistent with that. With the podcast that just came out earlier today and go with Kyler over Lamar. And then Dak would be my 5th is how I would do it. So it'd be Mahomes, Allen, Mahomes, Allen, Kyler, Lamar, Dak for me.
Yeah, so I'm similar. I'm a little bit lower on Josh Allen. I believe in Kyler Murray. He's my QB2. I have Jackson as my QB3 just because and maybe this is silly. Maybe I'm an idiot. I feel like his floor, just rushing floor alone, makes him a little bit safer in a 2 quarterback format than Josh Allen. And then Josh Allen is my QB4. But I think, like you said, they're all really, really close. I think it is splitting hairs. So I'm a little bit lower on Allen than others. But it's not like he's still in my top 4. So it's not like I don't like him. And then I have Dak 5. I'm a little concerned about him coming back from the injury, but indications are that he's going to be okay. I think that there's room for him to outperform QB5, but that's where I would draft him, and then I have Wilson 6. Sorry, I interrupted you. So let's get back to that other question. like any of the lower tier QBs, do you think like went a little bit higher or lower relative to the position than you would have expected?
I don't think his ADP is that far off, but I'm not as high on Joe Burrow as I was earlier this year, just given some of the stuff out of camp and him being supposedly a little gun shy, I suppose would be the word, in terms of just how he's reacting to being back on the field, having players rushing around him with his knee. I think I probably definitely like Matt Ryan more than Joe Burrow at this point in time. I like Lance more than Joe Burrow, with the assumption that Lance actually plays enough games to make that count. I like Lance more than Joe Burrow. And I think I probably also like Lawrence more than Joe Burrow. So Burrow went as a quarterback 14. I'd probably be taking him closer to, if I'm doing this math correctly in my head, I'd probably be taking him closer to quarterback 16 or 17 on this list right now. That's not to say that the person who took Burrow where they did is wrong, or that I even hate the pick. No. But if I'm really just kind of nitpicking my personal preferences, you got the Falcons. You can make a case that they're going to lead the league in pass attempts this year. Lance, the Konami code rushing upside again, hoping that he plays. And then I think the Jaguars offense could be a very interesting offense that could be very solid. And it's kind of a similar version of the Bengals offense, just in terms of a team that's probably also going to face a lot of negative game scripts, thus going to be throwing a lot. And the tiebreaker kind of being you have Lawrence not coming off of a devastating knee injury and playing with also good players around them. So Lawrence over Burrow, I think I'd probably do along with Matt Ryan.
Yeah, I think for me, the ones that stand out, I would have Ryan Fitzpatrick a little bit higher. I think I would take him over Roethlisberger, Mayfield. I mean, you might even convince me to take Fitzpatrick over Fields or Cousins. I don't think I'm going to go there anymore. Like I might have earlier in the offseason, but I don't think I will now. Yeah. And then in terms of one that went a little bit higher than I would take him, I mentioned this during the draft, but Daniel Jones is just not a player I'm very interested in. Like I would rather have Zach Wilson. I would rather take a chance on Sam Darnold. So, I mean, I'm only dropping him a couple spots in the QB rankings relative to where he went, but I'm not big on Jones, and I'm a little bit higher than this room on Fitzpatrick. So those are the two that kind of stood out to me.
Yeah, who's Daniel Jones' backup? Let's draft him.
Yeah, I actually could tell you that if you give me a couple minutes.
I don't know who it is off the top of my head. Maybe we should go with that guy, though.
Yeah, it's a little too late. That could have been our last pick. That would have been amazing. But we're too far gone. The draft is well over. Zach, I want to thank you for coming on and doing this with me. I had a lot of fun. And I do I don't love our team, but I think, again, relative to what the room gave us, I think we did well. We got punished, but, that's how it goes sometimes. Why don't you let folks know, again, what you're working on, where they can find you on social and all that good stuff.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at ZK_FFB. You can find my written work over at RotoViz along with 4for4. I do have a live stream show that I do on RotoViz called not the Best Ball Show. That's a podcast that I did, the Best Ball Show on RotoViz Radio. My live stream is Roster Lock, a Best Ball Show on the RotoViz YouTube channel. And over these next couple of weeks, really just going to be grinding out more articles, more content. I have a show tomorrow on my live stream, actually, with Jen Akins and Chris Allen of 4for4 on my YouTube stream. So we're going to do that. And then I have Denny Carter booked for the week after that. So a couple of live streams coming up that will hopefully be a lot of fun as we get ready for the season. And, all of it's always posted to Twitter. So, again, that's ZK_FFB.
You can follow me on Twitter at Greg Sauce. You can follow 4for4 at 4for4football. Head over to 4for4.com. Get subscribed. You will receive a voucher from the FFPC worth up to $35 to do one of these drafts that we just did. Pick up the 2 QBs draft guide. Head over to superflex.guide. Use promo code Greg. You'll get 11% off. This is a draft guide that is dedicated to 2 quarterback formats. So if you like what you saw here in the Superflex Best Ball, if you play in a managed season-long league that's 2 QB or Superflex, the draft guide is set up just for you. A lot of great stuff in there. Come check it out. I will be back next week for my last FFPC Best Ball draft on this stream. We'll be doing another one of these with Roto1 with Mike Alexander. So looking forward to that. I saw that he joined this draft, and I pinged him and I said, "Hey man, you want to come on and be a guest?" And he's like, "Yeah, that sounds great." So we'll have Mike on next week. Later this week, James Coe will be drafting an underdog best ball on this Best Ball live stream on Thursday. So tune in for that. Otherwise, really appreciate you all for tuning in, hanging out with us while we drafted this team. Anybody who's catching the replay, thank you for watching. We will catch you next time. Adios.